Alrighty, so last time we left you, we were starting up Camunda Run, and there it is in all its glory. This part we are going to create the first iteration of our process, which is going to be user task orientated, and it's going to have Camunda forms attached to the user tasks. For this, we need the Camunda modeler. As I mentioned in the other video, there's a link below for a project that contains all of the requirements for this tutorial, including all the code I'll be making at each stage, as well as the various things needed like Camunda Run and the modeler and so on. So click the link below to do that if you haven't already. So let's get started. So we're going to build a BPMN diagram in the modeler. Great. And we are going to start with, as I mentioned in the first video, we're going to start with helping out Lafayette escape from France. So the first thing is Lafayette needs, in fact, to escape France. At this point, he's already helped the Americans with the revolution and the French with the revolution, and I think he needs some time to just maybe take stock. So the first thing we need to do is, after we have realize that, is we have a new task. We're going to have a task to perform. It's going to be a user task, and it's going to be prepare for departure. Okay, so after preparing for departure, we are actually going to need to maybe get help from somebody, because he can't do it on his own. As wonderful as he is, he might actually do even better with some help from friends. So in this scenario, we are actually going to get help specifically from a friend of his called Jean Xavier. So get help from Jean Xavier. Okay, I think. Please correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. Next, he is a very optimistic chap. So assuming that this was a great success, we are going to serve time abroad. Okay, or save to overseas. He quite likes the US, so he can go there. And then that's our end. Then Lafayette is safe. Marvelous. So that's our project. Now, as I mentioned, there are lots of different task types in BPMN, and these have none at the moment. So I'm going to convert all of these to user tasks for now. So this is going to be a user task. This one here is going to be a user task. And this one here, also a user task, because all of these are going to be represented by some kind of front end, so that we require a user in order able to actually do any of this. I'm also going to give this process a name, which is going to be called help Lafayette escape. Okay, and give that name here as well. Great. It's executable, which is wonderful. Now we just need to save it. So let me just save this. I'm going to save it along with, in the tutorials folder, I'm going to call it Laf. Great. Okay, so here's our process. We don't have any UI for it yet, so let's actually build some UI for these two tasks, for the preparing for departure and for this. What I'm going to use to build this UI is going to use Camunda Forms. It's not the only way to use to build UI for Camunda, but it's quite quick and quite easy. At the moment, it has a pretty limited library, but by the time you watch this, maybe it's expanded. At the next release, it's going to have a lot more functionality. But for now, we're just going to use what's available there. So the first thing is a text field. Personally, I quite like reading, so I'm going to say the first thing we need to prepare for is a book to pack. Okay. What book would you like to bring on the trip? Okay, and that's going to be book. So this will be the field label and description. As you can see, this key variable here is going to be this key value is going to be a variable that gets created in the instance we can then refer to later. As I believe everyone should be reading, I'm going to make this field required. Okay. Now the next thing is there's a bunch of different places where Lafayette can get help. So I'm going to put that here. I'm going to say who can help. is the field label, and then who do you want to ask for help? And again, this is going to be the word help, and it's also required. Now, Lafayette can't just ask anybody for help. He needs to ask maybe very specific people or institutions. Now, in Lafayette's case, he can basically only really get help from two entities. As we mentioned, Jean Xavier and also Austria, the country, can maybe help him out. To ensure that he only asks for those people for help, you can see here that I've added a little expression here that says Jean Xavier or Austria are the only required, are the only things we actually are allowing him to add in here. So that's our first form. So let's save this. I'm going to save it in its own little directory called forms. And it's going to be called departure form. Okay, save that. Okay, so that's our first form done. Now, what is this form? This form is actually a JSON file. You can see here that it's predefined here. And what we'll be doing is we'll be deploying this alongside the Beefman model and then link them. And I'll show you how to do that at the end. But we're not finished yet. While we do have a prepare for departure, we still also need the get help from Xavier. So let's add a new form. So I'm going to go to Command Forms again, and this time we're going to we're going to say we need him to really ask for help here. It's not just going to be a very simple letter. So let's write request for help. We need to write something here. Say something convincing to get help. So this is going to be called help note, and definitely required. Now also, this does need something. Now, what does every good help request require? We want to make sure that Lafayette has the most success, and therefore we will require him to somewhere in this say please. It's a very good word to use, and I'm just going to add in the regular expression here a simple expression that ensures that he at least adds please to this. We're also going to add this. I'm going to save this first of all, and this is going to be called get help, ask for help form. Okay, great. And I am also going to, I want to see what books I have, right? Because I want to see what values I had in the previous form. Now to do that, I'm going to copy some stuff from the original form to make it a little faster than doing it the other way around. So I'm going to do that now. It's really, really common to want to see the variables that were added in the previous user task in the new one. And usually that means rebuilding the form again. We don't need to do that. We can actually go into the original form itself. And in the JSON, you see that all of the elements are described here. So we can actually just copy those straight out. Go to the newer form, go into the JSON here, and then actually add a comma, and then throw these new fields, and then there they are, they're alive. And the thing is, with the way the form works, if there is a variable with this name, it'll actually already show up, whatever, if it's already been filled in. So you don't need to do any linking or input output at all. So that's quite nice. So now we actually have two forms, this one and this one. We have our Beefman model, and now we need to attach them in some way. So prepare for departure, we need to tell this user task to use this form. This is pretty straightforward. What we need to do is we need to select the form. We have a form section here. We don't need to touch this area here, form fields. That's just for different types of UI. We're going to use form key. And the way it works is there's lots of ways, as I mentioned, of using front end with Camunda. If you want to use a Camunda form, you need to reference it by writing Camunda-forms. Then you need to explain how the engine is supposed to find this form. And in this case, where we're going to be deploying via the REST API, we're going to say deployment. And we're also then going to add the name of the file. In our case, it's departure form. .form. So this should end up, if we're lucky, give us the link the form in runtime to that one. And we'll do exactly the same thing for the other form. We'll click here, click on forms, and we'll just use the other form, ask for help form dot form. Okay, let's save that. So the next thing we do is we are going to deploy this via the REST API. Now, what we do is we click on this little button here called deploy current diagram on the diagram. And when we do, we should be pointing at automatically it should find the engine at this REST endpoint. Because this has additional artifacts, specifically those forms, we need to add the selected files. So if I click on add files, I'm going to go to these two forms and add them. There they are. So now they'll all be deployed together, which is why the form key said, look in the deployment, because we're all going to be in one place. So with that, that's all we need. Let's deploy. And deployment successful. Okay, so now it should be there in the engine. So let's run through it. To find out that it's been correctly deployed and working correctly, we actually just need to go to our web browser and back to the engine. So we'll log back in, demo. And here we are. We definitely want to do that. Great. And now we see that we have this number 1 here, process definition. So I'm going to click on that. And now we have help Lafayette escape is the name of our process. If I click on it, it looks like this. What we're looking at right now is one of the 2 web apps that are deployed. This is Camunda Cockpit. This is intended for sort of admin, sort of DevOpsy, sort of folk whose job it is to make sure things are still running correctly. Now we are actually going to spend some time in the other web app, which is called Task List. So if I go here to the little house in the top right and click on Task List, this is intended for an end user. So this is intended for somebody who starts process instances or maybe completes tasks, and we're going to do that right now. So first of all, I'm going to create a simple filter by clicking on Create Filter. This will mean that tasks will now show up in this list. There are currently none. So if I click on the top right, Start Process, I should have Help Lafayette Escape, which is our one process, and then click Start. So what should happen now, the process has started. We now have our Prepare for Departure. And if I click on that, we should then have our form has shown up. Meanwhile, the view of this from the DevOps perspective is if I refresh this page, we should then see that we have a token right here. We have an instance that has started and it is right there. So let's move things forward. So I need to claim this because right now it's read only because there's no user who actually owns this task. If I click claim, it then becomes readable again. So now what book shall we pack? For me, I'm going to pack The Storm Before the Storm by Mike Duncan. Quality book, everyone should check it out. And who can help? Well, oh no, I'm down to Austria, or yeah, let's go with Austria. And now I'm going to click complete. So you can see now that we've actually moved on to the next task. We now have to get help. And we have, as you can see, the data that was added in the previous task appears here. It's still read-only. And if I click on claim, we then see that we have, we can edit this if we like, but we also need to request some help. So let's do that. So let's say, get me the hell out of here. Now, obviously, we can't complete the task because, of course, this violates the saying please requirement. So let's just add a please at the end. There we go. Great. That's done. Now it's polite. And I click complete. Great. Meanwhile, Cockpit will be able to see, if we go back here, the token we expect to have moved to spend some time overseas. There we are. Okay. Now we step through the process. So what's up next? Let's make things more interesting. Let's start to add some more symbols and let's start to orchestrate, maybe instead of simple little user forms, we'll actually orchestrate some systems, which will happen in the next video.